Power of Influence. My name is Beth Rugg, and I'm the Professional Development Coordinator for SIGUCCS, and I'll be helping to facilitate this event. Shundra White is the Director of Information Technology Service Desk at the University of Memphis, and she's our presenter for today's session. Before we jump into the webinar, let's go over some basic information. By default, everyone is muted, so if you have a question, please chat it into the chat box. So if everyone could go ahead and say hi or send me some interesting piece of information about yourself, I'll know that you can know how to submit a question. Can you go ahead and do that, please? Great, thank you so much. Oh, I always love seeing familiar names. Other than that, I'm just going to go ahead and turn the session right over to Shundra because I know she has lots to say and is excited saying it. So over to you, Shundra.
Thank you so much, Beth. I am excited and honored that you guys have asked me to just share some information about leveraging the power of influence. I come saying that I've not been the person who has done an extensive study. I bring information based on my experiences and things that have actually worked, and so I'm just willing to share that. So I'm honored that you guys thought that this was an interesting enough topic to present it to a group of people and that they actually signed up and they're online. So thank you all, and we'll go ahead and jump right into this. So leveraging the power of influence, and again, I'm Shundra White. So I usually start the thing off with a few things about let's agree. And so we're going to try to be considerate in our comments because this is not, as I said earlier, this is not necessarily something that you'll find as an exact science. It definitely takes a little bit of massaging. So I'm asking that you have an open mind and that we learn to enhance others from our work and or from our mission in life. Another thing that I'd like for us to agree on is to recommit to something that will enhance either us personally or professionally. And lastly, let's just have a good time and enjoy this experience. So a little bit about myself, because people oftentimes are wondering, I'm not a celebrity by any means. I'm just a regular person who's lived a regular life. And so I'll tell you a little bit about myself as to kind of how I came into this and how I've had to reflect back, because really in leveraging the power of influence is really about you, the person. So to give you a little bit about me, I seem to be a little bit influenced, if you will, by the number 8. And that's probably because my birthday is March 8th. And there are a lot of other people who would share the date of being born on the 8th with me. My daughter, who I have a 20-year-old daughter who is also, her birthday is also on the 8th. And so as I began to move forward, I also have an uncle who's born on the 8th of July. And sitting and thinking about my life and think people that were important to me, they actually ended up having kind of that 8 in common. So they end up being a very important number for some reason, and I just kind of stuck to it. So as I said, the ladybug in my life, she born September 8th. I have 1998 was a good year for me because not only did I buy a house, but I also bought a car that year. And so I started thinking about some things. And as I moved forward, I started thinking about some things as having a daughter and some things that were important to me and were relevant to me. I learned a little bit more about the technology and the training that I got and things of that nature. And so I started at the university while this last November I celebrated my 8th year. So that was exciting. But over time, when you want to, you get good at what you do, and over time you actually sometimes find yourself behind the 8 ball. And you might end up looking a little bit like this, looking at a road ahead and trying to figure out what's in front of you. And sometimes when you look ahead, it doesn't look like the best situation is ahead of you. And things can look a little overwhelming, even though there may not necessarily be anything interesting about what is happening ahead of you.
Shundra, can I interrupt for a second? Somebody's reported a problem with the sound not being great. Can other people let me know if what you're hearing is good or not? If you can just chat that in real quick. A couple people are reporting that the sound is fading in and out. So I don't know, Shundra, are you on speaker? Are you able to pick up the headset?
Yeah, I'm able to pick up now. So I've picked up. So guys, can you let me know?
That's
Is that a
better, I
little bit
think.
better?
I think that's better.
Okay.
Yes, much people are saying that's better.
Perfect.
So thank you. Sorry to
Perfect.
interrupt.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Thank you for letting me know that. So as I move forward, here's a little bit of how I wanted to look at life. And so I'm thinking about things, and it's, mind you, this is all about, we're at a point where we need to make some changes, or we need to do something different, or we need to stay relevant. And so I had to do an assessment, and I had to do this thing of ideal versus reality. And so it would have been ideal if I could have gone to my pool of resources and picked these pieces that I need to build the life I want. And so I wanted my resources to kind of look like this big thing of Legos, where I could pick the pieces I want, but that was the ideal. But the reality was that I only had a few pieces, and that those pieces weren't actually going to get me the life that I hoped for, or it wasn't going to get me to that next level. So then I learned, and I reached back into my undergrad days and thought about this invisible knapsack, which I'll talk a little bit more. But this is a Peggy McIntosh piece where she talks about that we all kind of go around with this knapsack, and we all have these things that we carry. And we carry them, the people that we work for carry them, the people that we work with. We all have this invisible knapsack that have all these different pieces that make us who we are. And it affect the influence. And so Ms. McIntosh says that when we talk about honoring and telling individual stories, that the people that we work with, which is whom we have to have this influence with, the people that we work with, everyone has their own individual experience, and it's sacred to each of us. And to talk about those things, it allows people to then have this framework of a personal experience, and it allows people to then trust us. These are things that build trust and have kind of this statistical pattern. And then she talks a little bit about this serial testimony piece, where there is, no matter whether you have adults or school children, people like to talk about things from their experience. And it's not about their opinion. It's not about, well, if I were you. It's really about the experience. And so that's how you're going to, these are some of the foundational pieces in how you're going to influence others and use that power a little later on. So then we look at, what is leveraging influence? What does that actually mean? And so I reference Merriam-Webster just because, it's a classic piece that says there's a power to change or affect someone or something. There's a power to cause change without actually directly forcing that change to happen. And so in leveraging that influence, you want to make that change, but you don't want to directly force it. That's a little different component of it. You're wanting to be a person or thing that affects someone in an important way. So then we think about, okay, so what type of things influence us? So you have things like health and education and family and friends. Obviously, our jobs affect us because, for the most part, or influence us because, for the most part, that's why we're here. You have conversations, and then you have experiences like movies that you've seen and that make an impact, whether you're raising a child or whether you just are a movie buff. And then you put all of that together and you come up with a level of wisdom. So then, to talk a little bit about my story and my influences, would be to say that, I've done a few. I was a cheerleader, things like that, where those were some fun times in my life. That number 8 that I was telling you about earlier, I learned that if you kind of lay that on its side, it becomes an infinity symbol. And so that gave me influence, and it gave me actually encouragement to kind of think about some of the things that had actually happened. So that growing up, my mom worked very hard, and I had family and friends, and was homeless at 18, but I had a child at 19, and those things change you forever. There were things like I went to the dentist a lot, and I rode my bike a lot. And some of the jobs that I had included things like McDonald's and promise companies. And people, you'll learn that when people go from one company to another, that they bring those experiences with them, and that those things will influence them. And then you have to sit down and look at what's most important to me. What do I value? And kind of have those things in a list. So things like honesty and consistency, details and success, family and peace are things that are important to me. And these are things that you want to make sure that you are always keeping up front, and that you don't have a problem sharing these type of values with people, and helping people to understand that this is what's important, because when it comes to that influence, you're going to connect with people who have similar values. And then there's always authority. I've always been someone who had no problem with respecting authority and wanting authority, giving authority just their kudos or doing what they ask me to do. So what influences you? And so think about the things that you come in contact with. Think about things over time that have been important to you and why you make the decisions that you make. Because when you leverage the power of influence, it starts with you. It's a personal, here's what I can do best, here's where my strengths are, here's where my weaknesses are. It starts there, and then you can start building, because in a little bit I'm going to give you a framework that helps you to actually understand how you need to put these pieces together in order to actually do the influence part. That's when it becomes powerful. So then think about, I looked at those things and said, well, think about what influences you most. And so are you influenced by perceived failures, or are you influenced by stagnation? Are you influenced by loss? Because those things do happen. And you have to understand that if you lead people, they have those same things. So if they failed in a project, or if they failed at something at home, that experience comes with them. And so there may be a little bit of hesitation on the next thing. Or they may need a little bit of time to grieve, if you will, that loss or that failure. So now let's talk about challenges. You can have all the knowledge in the world, or at least what your mind can hold, but without using power and authority, without using your influence, you're going to feel limited in your potential, you're going to grow resentful in your position, and you might even question your value or your purpose. So if you have staff members or coworkers or friends or family members, because this is not something that only works at work. This works at home. I teach this in several areas, and this works no matter in any situation, really. You've got to have these, you've got to deal with these challenges, and sometimes you may have people who, sorry about that. I do apologize because I'm not exactly sure what happened, but
That's good, Shundra. We see your title slide again.
Okay. Sorry about this. Trying to move my give me just a second. I do apologize because I'm not understanding why my...
Well, I think all of us understand technology and how challenging.
Yes, and it just, all of a sudden, it just decided that it wanted to do something totally different. And I have duplicate windows and everything going on, so let's see here. We are here.
There we go. Now we've got it.
Okay. Do you also, because I have some other things on my screen, so is that all you guys see is let's talk about
challenges.
Okay, perfect. So for some reason it's showing a couple other things on my screen, so we can move forward. All right. So in challenges we have to talk about, okay, so now let's eat our peas. So we have kind of this concept of what are your P's? Well, your P's are your abilities, your potential, really, which is your abilities, your position, your place in society, your purpose. It's that thing that you do that brings value to whatever you attempt. And then you have to have this deeper conviction, the better you feel. And to eat your P's is okay because they're good for you. So in leveraging influence, here's the framework. You want to look at and think about, there's an internal, which is a level 1, versus an external. So internally, you want to do things. This is what you have to do, because it starts with you. Remember, I did all this information and kind of exposed myself a little bit in talking about here's what's going on with me and how I got to this point. So you have to identify a goal. You've got to be able to see the outcome. You got to envision it. You got to have players and accountability partners, and you got to have your values in place. There are rules. There are rules. There's some history and statistics that can't be overlooked. You've got to set some investment levels. You got to be able to put some things in, some skin in the game, if you will, like time, budget, and things like that. Those things have to happen. So then, externally, okay, so that's a level, this is level one, but this is an external piece. Now you got to communicate that goal, and you got to share the vision of the outcome. If people need to know where they're headed, and they need to know what the end is going to look like in order for them to feel that sense of accomplishment and in order for them to be there with you, you've got to include them. And so one of the things that sometimes is difficult to do is that we oftentimes forget, or we try to kind of plan everything and then we issue it out, but then people don't really have, there's no accountability there. They're basically, and they don't have any skin in the game. So you also want to communicate the values. If people know that consistency is what you're going for, and that's going to be a very important thing because that's what your campus is looking for, that's what your executives need, that's what the president is your campus president is if they're all about transparency, then you want to make sure that those values are out there. But then you got to make sure that the external group appreciates the rules, the history, and the stats. I was telling another time when I presented this, I was telling a group of people that I was working with the librarians on a project, and librarians and IT folks oftentimes don't really see eye to eye. You have IT folks who want to do something quick, fast, and in a hurry, and it's like we can turn it around in 3 days. Then you have librarians who oftentimes they want to take their time and let's think about it, let's talk about it, and they want to have a couple of meetings about it. And so we have to appreciate, when you're working with different groups, you've got to appreciate the history behind it. If you're new to the organization, you've got to appreciate that there were some things that were either tried or that maybe they even were accomplished in the past, and stats are important. And then you want to offer investment levels. You want to offer for the external, you want to offer those things and say, I'm willing to put in this much time, I'm willing to put this amount of money to it, or whatever other things that may be necessary. And so in level one on the left side here, you have to identify, and that's you. So you've got to keep calm and get dressed. So you've got to keep calm as the leader, as the person who is leading the team. You've got to keep calm. You've got to make sure that you're poised, and that when I say get dressed, you've got to present to the team or to whomever you're presenting to that this is a polished piece. And then for the other side, so for the folks that you're trying to influence or that you want to get buy-in from, then it's for them, it's just to keep calm and to influence them. So that's kind of how that works out. So now the goals, what should you accomplish? And then the problem that you're solving needs to be apparent, and is it smart? When you're looking at the envision piece, you want to say, in your mind's eye, what positive impact do you see? The people, the players and the accountability partners, as if you remember I said earlier, those groups are important. You want to put the people with the right skill sets and influence. If you've done any information, or if you are connected with Gartner, one of the top things was about how to hire and maintain your key staff, and how to, we can hire them, but sometimes maintaining them is a little bit difficult. But then in addition to that, if you may have some staff that you've had, and because in higher ed, people hang out for a while. They got 15, 20, 25, 30 years and plan to retire. So how do you make sure that they continue to have the right skill set without it being a battle? Because sometimes they like what they do, and they really may not be totally into change, but they realize that they probably need to, because with our economy and the things with our budgets that are shrinking, we've got to have the right players, and we've got to have the right skill sets. And I've actually had to do a lot of this, where you get people who have 20+ years, and you're trying to adjust their skill sets, and you're trying to help them understand that I want you to be successful, and here's how we're going to do that. Your accountability partners are people you can trust and you can depend on to train, encourage, or hold the players responsible. Remember, your accountability partners may not necessarily be the individuals who are doing the work, but it's your coworkers, it's your colleagues who you can sit down. Maybe you're on a team, and it's people who you can sit down and say, hold me responsible, hold the players responsible for their actions. because you need the accountability piece. The players have the skills, but the accountability partners have the influence. And then you have values, what's important, what's motivating, and then what's the point. So now I was talking a little bit about the rules, the history, and the stats, and how we have to respect those things. Those things exist. So what should you take into consideration? And are there HR guidelines, for example? Are there HR guidelines that would influence your actions? What's the culture of your college or university? And then you have state, local, and federal laws that are noteworthy. You can't overlook these things. When you sit down, people expect and want, in order for you to influence, what happens is you've got to, it's kind of like, it's charisma, really. It's sitting down and it's making sure that if I'm an HR person and you want to talk to me about hiring people, I want to know that you've done your homework. So yeah, in level one, you gotta think about those things, because you may have a group of players that have great skills, but they're not good at playing within the rules. And I mean, we watch games. As a matter of fact, the Grizzlies played yesterday, and while they didn't do such a great job, however, there are rules to the game. There are stats that say that you have to do certain things. And so we have to make sure as you lead and as you influence, even if the rules are in your home, even if the rules are in your relationship, or if they're in your marriage, or if they're at work, or wherever, there are rules, and there's history there, and there are stats there that make people a little bit more comfortable. And then you have your investments. How much time are you willing to commit? Is there a budget? If there is a current budget, is it sufficient and reasonable? Because sometimes we want to get a new ITSM and we want to throw $30,000. Well, that's not reasonable. That's not sufficient. That's not enough. And so the current budget needs to be revised. And then what about personal time and influences or resources? Is there something that, are you going to, sometimes we have projects, and that means that you have to work late. So investing personal time may be necessary. We're all a lot of us are in higher ed, and we're doing some of the skill set part. So if we need to do some personal time investment, meaning we need to work beyond our 37 and a half or 40 hours or whatever it is that we agreed to work per week, understanding that has to have, you have to be kind and ask and hope that people are willing to invest that. That's an investment. That's not time that they necessarily get back. And so now it's time for level 2 in planning the work. So in planning the work, create the action items, identify the players, select accountability partners, and get a date in there to accomplish it. When you get the actions, refer to level 1, deliberate, be focused and simple, because people can keep up when it's focused and it's simple. Get more people involved. People who influence people. It's not so much as influencing a computer. I may not have necessarily got this computer to function right because it's doing some strange things. So my influence there may be a little shabby. But when it comes to the influence, it actually happens with people. It's people and their skill set, their tenacity, their understanding, their motivation. That's the relationship, and that's what you're influencing. And that allows you to create new relationships and share authority with the partners. It's not just you, it's them as well. So in all of that, talking about leveraging the influence, here's some additional tips. You never know how little or much you influence others. Trust me when I say I found and I've come in contact with so many people who have many years later said, either sent me a little email to say they appreciated something I said or did. I terminated a student employee one day, and about 2 or 3 years later, she emailed me back and said, thank you for terminating me. And so my initial thought was, you spent that kind of time to say thank you for terminating me, because it kind of seemed a little off. But when I read her email a little further, she said that I thank you for terminating me because it made me it made me focus, and it made me understand that I had gotten a little complacent and I wasn't giving you 100%, and I could have done better. And so without me actually making her look at things and be more appreciative of things, she felt like she would have just continued to kind of be complacent and just go today.
So therefore, display some common values and stick to them. My teams know that there are some key things that are going to be important to me, and I'm always going to incorporate the things that are important to our executives. Before I hire a group of people, like I got 3 positions open right now, and before I hire people, I do a webinar with them and let them know all of the things that are important to me and all the things that are important to the executives, and so that they understand what they're coming into. Because if consistency is something that they have trouble with, and that's something that's on my values, I need you to understand before you accept the position that this is what you're accepting. People remember very little of what you say, and the part they do remember has a great chance of being misunderstood or miscommunicated. You can and won't influence everyone to perform exactly as you hope, so you have 2 choices. Together, you find a happy medium, or you find a better space or fit for you or the other person. And so it's a give or take. Together, we can be happy, or we might have to separate. And so that doesn't mean that somebody is terminated. It may mean that they're moved to a different team. I have had people that have been on my, I have one person in particular that's been on my team and was on my team for 1.5 years, 2 years. But my team is a little bit too, we're probably a little too family oriented. We're very sensitive to the needs and kind of the things that happen with each other. And so if the person that person didn't function well in that environment. We don't really go to lunch a lot together, but we do talk a lot. And so that person wasn't comfortable, so they moved them to a different team, and I think that they're working well over there. They didn't lose their job. It's just that the team culture was not probably the best fit for them. You got to love what you do, even when you get to the parts that you don't like. So remember to eat your peas, understand your position, know your purpose, and then use your potential. We all have a story, and no 2 stories are alike. So you're carrying your invisible knapsacks, and not just you, but the people that you work with and work around. I'm carrying mine, you're carrying yours. So understand that no 2 stories are alike, and there are things that are in people's minds that influence them. And so it's an indirect motivation. You don't realize that you're influencing people, but you really are. So finally, to leverage your influence, start by envisioning the outcome, assess the values, remember to respect the rules. Hello?
We're still here.
Oh, okay. Remember to respect the rules, history, and statistics. Be the first to invest time, money, and other necessary resources to the goal. Plan the work, do the work on time. And so it has, again, been my pleasure to discuss this topic with you. And if you have any questions, concerns, or comments, I am definitely open to those. I apologize. There was some other kind of strange thing going off, and it made me think that my phone had disconnected. It made me think my phone had disconnected, so I wanted to touch base and make sure that I hadn't, for some strange reason, technology hadn't done something strange.
Yep, nope, you have not disconnected at all. So if anybody who's in the audience has any questions, feel free to chat them in right now, and I will share them with Shundra. Shundra, I'm just curious, a little bit more specific. So how do you have a visioning meeting with your team, or how do you really communicate the end goal and then, have everybody working together to achieve that end goal? Do you have a retreat?
Sure. I actually have things all along the year. I usually try to bring, so I have 3 teams, and I bring them together every week for a meeting. We actually had a meeting today, and I told them I only had 30 minutes to talk to them. They were really excited because our meetings usually last about an hour and a half. So I have 3 teams, and they consist of about 18 people. And what I do is I have a strategic meeting every year. That strategic meeting says, this year it talked about, I gave each of them a motto. I gave each of them their kind of elevator speech. And when I say I gave it to them, I don't want you to think that I kind of jotted down and said, here's the thing. First of all, what they did was, they're used to this because we do it every year. So they came to me with things that they want to do. And we always do this around their professional development time, because if it means that they need training, I put it in their professional development. And when I get ready to do my budgets, I make sure that in the budget I have allotted how many ever dollars that they will need for their professional development. So the team brings to me, there's a team lead, and the team lead brings to me they hope to accomplish. What's the key thing that they want to do for this upcoming year. And so I give them, and then once they do that, I create a strategic plan, and I present it to the entire, all 18 people, because everybody needs to know what everyone's doing. So the team has actually already, they've created an idea, and I may tweak it a little bit to kind of, I usually don't have to too much, but sometimes I may tweak it a little bit. But yes, you definitely need consistent communication. So I'm committed to my weekly meetings with the entire team. I also meet I try to meet at least twice a month, because each team has their own internal meeting. I try to join in on those. And mind you, they had to tell me that they needed me to come to these meetings. I thought that it was just a meeting where they didn't want me in, and they could kind of do their own thing. But they actually, in our last session, they were saying, we actually need you to come to our internal meetings, because that will help us to make sure we stay on track. And then I take some meetings. I have in their professional development, I have what I call a director's choice book, because everyone on my team is required to read 3 books a year, 1 personal, 1 professional, and then a director's choice. That director's choice book is a book that I feel is going to take our team to the next level. This past year, we read Getting Naked. So everybody reads that. I give them plenty of time. They have to purchase the book, and then I take one of our weekly meetings, and we talk about it. So we're always looking at least every quarter, we're taking time to talk about, are we on track? Are we getting to the right thing? Do I need to put more money somewhere? Do I need to go ask for money? Okay, well, what happens if I don't get it? Then what?
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Others? Anybody else have some questions? I am not seeing any questions come in, but I'm sure it's not because there's not people thinking deeply out there.
And I can't, when they were responding to you earlier, my chat is not actually working, so I don't see anything. So you'll definitely have to let me know, because I think earlier you were having individuals to test the chat and make sure that it was working, and mine wasn't actually functioning.
No worries. I know one comment, no question, but definitely great information. So I do want everyone to know that Shundra will be doing a workshop at the conference. So if this is kind of giving you a taste for something you're interested in learning more about, then there will be an opportunity to do that as a pre-conference workshop in St. Petersburg.
Right, and in that conference, so just to also give you a little bit more information, in that conference, I'll be asking that I hope that people will have things that they'll want to kind of put in this framework, and we'll really be digging into it. The session will look a little different because that's kind of this session, the webinar that we just went through, it just basically gives kind of a foundational piece. So we'll get into a lot more of the how do we put this where, and I'll definitely want, I would encourage people to bring their information, bring me the people, bring me their actions, bring me the goals that they hope for, bring their values, things like that, even bring the values of their executive teams, like their CIOs, CFOs, their presidents, things like that, and so we can actually really dig into how you're gonna get those influences happening.
Now the questions are flying in now. So we have a question. Do you have any specific recommendations for books that help new managers get started?
I actually do. So for new managers, definitely read Good to Great. That is one that Good to Great. Make sure you get in, do some discovering your strengths. I'm a big strength finder person. When I bring my team, when I hire people, the very first thing that I do is I give them that Discover Your Gifts, and I think that's Marcus Buckingham and last name Clifton. I can't think of his first name. Get that book. It's not a reading book. It's really just a book of, take this little quiz, and I think you can do it online as well for new managers because you need to know your skill set. You need to know the things that you do well so that you can then start adding people to your team that do the other things well. I would also check into SkillPath, which is a training entity, and they have trainings for like $150. Um, you know, sometimes it goes to like $225, but that's very inexpensive in considering how much, you know, training can get to be. But they have a lot of, you know, team building. I send just about everybody on my team to those things. They have a lot of, you know, interesting things and it's very inexpensive. Let's see. I think I had one other book. Oh, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Can't remember right now the name of the author, but the title alone is very intriguing. So it says, what got you here? So basically, he's trying to help you to understand that you've been successful because you've gotten here to this management level, but understand that it's not going to get you to the next level, and you're going to have to make some changes to some things. And so I read that book and was floored because I've learned some stuff, and then came back to my team, and I was able to put them in a position where they could tell me some hard stuff about myself, and I learned from it. So those are just a few. You're more than willing to. Yeah, that's a few that'll get you started.
And I think Mo said it's Now Discover Your Strength by Marcus Buckingham.
Okay, yeah, Now. Yeah, it is that. They do have that Now Discover Your Strengths. Yeah. I think, I don't remember if it was that or not, but I really do like that. That's a really good book. I think leadership is really about, it starts with the person, it starts with the leader, it starts with you. You have to be very confident in what you can do, what you can't do. You have to have a level of transparency that allows people to then say, Shundra knows she's not the best at, so Shundra's not very good at off the fly. I'm a planner. And so, but I got people, and they know that. It's like, if it has to happen in 30 minutes, oh my, I'm just going to sit and look. But if you let me plan it, you're going to get a great thing. So what I do is I bring people who are great, like, off the cuff type folk. They can come up with an idea in 30 seconds because I know that's not my strong suit. I'm a strategic person. I have to plan.
Great. We have another question. What was your team's buy-in for required book readings?
I hope I understand your question. Are you meaning, well, let's see. Well,
I think you had said you required your team to read 3 books a year, and
right.
I think that's just an interesting requirement. What was their response, or how did you get them to?
So for me, it wasn't very difficult because it wasn't very difficult because I have a group of folks who like to learn, but I did earn, if you will, some people who had been at the university for years and they never had that expectation put on them. So what I did was I tried to somewhat negotiate, if you will. So if it was going to be a hardship, I said, well, at least do a personal, because sometimes people don't think they need professional development. So I just suggest that they do a personal. They don't have to do a book report or anything like that. And most of the folks that I'm working with, they don't mind reading. It could even be a magazine, but I really do let people know that I want to encourage them to grow, and I want to encourage them to learn about things that they may want to do. I have someone who's reading a book on photography. It's a hobby. That's their personal growth, and so I'm just encouraging them to do that. They actually do it, but we just have a general conversation about it when we get to the end of the session. As far as the book that they had to purchase, what I try to do is give them plenty of time. I'll pick that book out in like October and ask them to have it in January. Now, I got technical people. So I got folks who buy the hardback, like me, because they want something in their hand. I have people who go out and do the audio. I even had someone who got the book from the library, and so they just, like, borrowed it.
Great. We have another question here. Do you ever have employees that are reluctant to change? And if so, how do you deal with it?
Absolutely. As I said, the team that I have, all of them I've not picked out. Some of them that I inherited, they were already here, and so yes, they're reluctant to change. I have people who are very new. I have even had people who are new and didn't want to change. So I picked them out, and then they acted like they didn't understand. So how do I handle that? With much communication. I sit down and I actually, so if you're new, also another book that would be good is Crucial Conversations. It's a red cover book, and I apologize, I don't know the authors of these, I just kind of know the titles, but there's a book about crucial conversations and how to have those. And so I'm very open with my team to say, I work really hard to make sure that this team stays intact. While I can't guarantee everything because budgets happen, I want to try to, if it ever came to the point where I had to make a decision about anybody on my team or reducing the number of folks on my team, I want it to be a difficult decision. I want to be able to say, these are the new things that this person is doing. This is how they're going to take us and keep us on our strategic goal. So I then work very closely with that particular staff member to let them know that I'm not the enemy. I'm actually the advocate. Because when it comes to sitting down and talking about where are we going strategically, how is the university going to move forward, and how is the service desk or IT, how are those entities going to remain relevant, I'm the one that's sitting at the table, and I know what we need, so I need you to trust me. That I really do say that. I need you to trust me when I tell you that I need your skill set to change, because I can't I can't influence my executives to be the same that we've always been, because we can't stay relevant at that. So people, it takes time. They don't get it all the time the first time. I've even had to go so far as I had to go to HR on one of my employees to say, I've done all these things and they're still not responding. But then I came back and let that person know that this is where I am. I've had to go to HR because I don't know anything else to do. Because I've given you training, I've worked with you, I've given you options, and you still aren't being a team player. You're giving me no choice. And then I got change.
Great, thank you. How do you motivate and influence staff to take ownership in their work and projects when they do not seem to have an interest?
Well, so here's what I try to do. So if you remember, I was telling you about the Strengths Finder, right? So I give projects out based on that. If a project needs, so I got somebody who's like early 20s on my team, and so he's great at short-term projects that have an end, that a pretty quick end. So I typically try not to give him, he's that relator, I think, or I can't remember exactly which one, but I'm going to give him projects that he's great at. Like, I'm not going to give him, I gave him a website design project. The website redesign project was a 45-day project. He can handle that. But if I gave him something like, I have an ITSM project happening, we've been working on that for a year, he would lose steam, okay? So what happens is that when you get those strength finders, you want to pair your teams up, or you want to put your project leads in the areas where the project is going to be good for them. Now, let me tell you also, I've given a project to someone, they lost steam, I've taken it from them and given it to somebody else. I have had that to happen because either they didn't have the right influence, or maybe they just weren't confident enough. I had a iTunes U project going on, and I had given it to one of the team members to get that started. Well, they had a hard time with the vendor. Like, they couldn't really relate and communicate with the vendor and tell the vendor what they needed. So what I did was I told them, okay, you tried this. What I'm going to do now is you've gotten to this point. They had gotten a few things done. So I said, well, you know what? You're done with this project. I'm going to hand it off to this person to get this other part done. And I let them be the project lead. So I think the part of that is give yourself flexibility to adjust your players, because when you got new people, sometimes you think that'll be a good thing for them, but if you catch them at a bad time where they got stuff going on in their marriage and stuff like that, or their kids giving them hell, or I'm sorry, their kids giving them a hard time or something along that line, what you might want to do is give them a little bit of break and come back to them at another time, because all that stuff, that knapsack is right there.
That's great. Thank you. Well, I have a feeling we could talk for a long time, but Shundra, I just want to thank you. I know it's actually quite a nice little break in the middle of the day to suddenly be inspired again. So I appreciate that, and I'm sure others do as well. For those of you listening, thank you for your time and for your attention, and I hope you've enjoyed this webinar. Thank you so much, Shundra.
You're welcome.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.